98.1 FM and AM 1220.
The following is sponsored programming and does not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of KHTS or its ownership.
This is Common Ground, and I'm Jason Downs. Welcome to a place where we can all agree on the important stuff. It's good to have you here. Today is October 19th. We are lucky enough to have the former Assistant United States Attorney with us again, Kim Wehle. She's an author, a law professor, a CBS News and legal analyst, a Constitution demystifier, and just an all-around well-informed person. Kind of like our very own Lou Esbin, who is also joining us today. Lou, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So glad to have you back on the show. It feels like it's been a while. It has. We have. We had a little scheduling mix-up, so our special guest today, Kim Wehle, who is actually on the East Coast, she something came up, and so I had to pre-record our interview just a few moments ago. So I'm going to play that, and then Lou, I'd love your thoughts on that before we take our first break, where we will then speak to a census worker. Her name is Terry Collier, and she's also a wonderful person, but has been working with the census, and that has taken an interesting turn this week as well. So lots of great stuff today. First, let's give a shout out to Denny & Company LLP, one of our wonderful sponsors, certified public accountants. They make your life less taxing. Reach out to Matt Denny for all your accounting needs at dennyllp.com or by calling 661-286-8860. Denny & Company, they make your life less taxing. So, Kim Wehle. As I said, she's an author, lawyer, law professor, legal expert. She's been on all the big shows, CBS, NBC, CNN, BBC, NPR, Fox, C-SPAN, PBS. Wehle has contributed to Politico, The Bulwark, The Atlantic, The Hill. She's written for the Baltimore Sun, the LA Times. As I mentioned, she's a former assistant U.S. attorney, associate independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation, and author of 2 books, including What You Need to Know About Voting and Why, which is what we were focusing on today. So let's play the interview. Go ahead, Patty. I know you've been very, very busy leading up to the election, I imagine.
Yeah, it's been very busy. Lots of people want to understand this process. And then, of course, we had the Supreme Court confirmation hearings last week, which is also throwing a lot of people into, a tizzy for good reason. So I've been talking a lot about that as well.
And it has so much to do with the election. So, look, I mean, yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So briefly, what do you think the implications are from your standpoint? And should they wait, in your opinion, until the election results are in?
I think the implications can't really be overstated at this point, in part because I've come to the conclusion that, frankly, the U.S. Supreme Court has too much power in our democracy. It takes, 2/3 of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the state legislatures to actually amend the Constitution. But when 5 justices on the Supreme Court interpret it one way or another, that is essentially works as an amendment. And they're not there through an election. They can't be fired in a manner that reflects the will of the people. And since the filibuster was, basically removed first for lower federal court judges under a Democratic Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader, and then by Mitch McConnell, I mean, we've seen 3 justices, or we will see, presuming that we'll see Amy Coney Barrett, put on the court with literally zero Democratic participation by non-Republicans. And that is just, to me, not consistent with government by we the people. And the suggestion that Judge Barrett and others have made that somehow originalism or textualism is a black and white inquiry. That's just false. I mean, she will bring her own ideological views, and the implications are sweeping, but well beyond abortion. As you indicate, I think the voting rights is huge, and the election is huge. And now we have Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, and a potential Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who all worked on the Bush versus Gore litigation that put George Bush in office for 8 years as lawyers.
Which really was the beginning of my own personal disillusionment with this whole process back in 2000. Do you think that it's become so much about winning that in this case the Republicans don't care that they wouldn't allow Merrick Garland to even be heard or seen? Do you think they don't care about the democratic process, and that no, voices aside from Republican voices are being heard in this particular process? Do you think that that's what's happened?
Well, if you heard Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Rhode Island, do a presentation, I think on the first day that Amy Coney Barrett was actually answering questions during the confirmation process, he basically traced sort of the money that goes from corporations through the Federal Society, which is a conservative legal think tank that then is behind the appointment of conservative justices on the Supreme Court and packing the lower federal courts with conservative justices. And then the same monies are used, according to this presentation, to then fund amicus briefs, dozens of them in the Supreme Court, to influence a particular point of view. So I think this is a much larger, full-scale, multi-decade effort, and so far successful one, for high-value voters, but high-income people as well as corporations, to infiltrate government in a way that is kind of lockstep, right? Or I should say lockdown. More than 50% of kids under the age of 16 are now people of color in this country. So the demographic will change as far as voters. It's not going to be white males much longer. But if you pack the courts this way, that minority point of view then is very, very difficult to evade. It's very difficult, particularly if it's on this, people are on the Supreme Court. The democratic process can't upend that, which is why I think that I call it unpacking the court, frankly, discussions around reconfiguring the court to make it more democratic and more representative have to be on the table, and it should be for both Republicans and Democrats. So I do think, to answer your question bluntly, it's what the framers understood. I mean, power corrupts, and people will work hard to entrench and ultimately abuse power, and Republicans are human beings, and they've just, through Mitch McConnell and others, have been extraordinarily successful at arming their way into long-standing entrenched power.
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Right.
So you mentioned packing the court, but what about stacking the court? So this is another buzzword we're now hearing, that the Republicans are accusing Biden, he's going to stack the court. So they've been packing it. What about stacking?
Well, I mean, packing, stacking, I think they're probably interchangeable. We have a stacked court right now since 1969. Adding more people.
What's the proper terminology for that?
Well, I think people say packing or stacking. I don't like either of those. Like I said, I think it's unpacking the court, frankly. Okay. Unpacking the court is a better, more accurate tagline, whether, of course, that will come with a cost. I'm not saying we should do it necessarily. I'm not saying there are no implications or consequences to adding justices to the court. But since 1969, only 4 justices have been appointed by Democratic presidents, around 15 by conservatives.
Wow.
That is not representative of our country. So, and the last 3, obviously what happened with Merrick Garland was strong-arming, saying, maybe this is against the rules, but I'm in power, I'm going to do it my way, which then destroyed the legitimacy of the court. I mean, that was a maneuver that damaged the integrity and legitimacy of the court to sort of win at all costs. So in my mind, there are a number of potential solutions, not just, as you indicate, adding to the Supreme Court the numbers. There have been others other than 9. There have been 6. There have been fewer. That's created by Congress. That's established by statute. It's not in the Constitution. So it wouldn't even be Joe Biden doing it. It would be a Congress, presumably a Democratic Congress if the Senate flipped. So there's nothing unconstitutional or illegal about that. And, having more than just this one point of view in the 6-3 majority on issues, not just, again, abortion rights, but one of my concerns is just, the very eager way in which a conservative court has approached legislation that it doesn't like. I mean, legislation is passed through representatives of the people. And if you don't like the legislation, you can change the legislation, right, by electing different people. But the court struck down a key part of the Voting Rights Act. The court struck down the McCain-Feingold bill that has led to an unbelievable amount of dark money in politics. The court has been quite aggressive in striking down Democratic bills and legislation. In my mind, a conservative should say, listen, that's not our job. If it's not blatantly constitutional, that is, carves out just African Americans or something, then you should leave well enough alone and let the political process resolve it. That was Justice Scalia's scholarship anyway, and he is supposed to be the leader of this conservative movement intellectually.
Well, and what I hear you talking about is imbalance of power.
Correct.
Right? Essentially, which brings me to your book and to the fact that we're in the middle of an election. 15 days left of voting. As you pointed out, every day is now election day. Your book recently came out, What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. So, to bring some balance back to the power, what do we need to know about voting?
What we need to know is that Congress can fix a lot of the problems in voting. I think we're seeing the number one thing that is different from our democracy and other functioning democracies, and that is that our right to vote depends on our zip code. The framers left it to the states, and the states do it very differently. In Oregon, you can walk in, register that very same day, and vote that same day. Other places, you have to register. We're seeing it, today, Pennsylvania registration closes. So it's a critical swing state. If someone didn't register today, they are cut out of the electoral process. But if they happen to be an Oregon resident, they can walk into the polls on November 3rd and vote. So Congress can and should do more. There's a bill, H.R. 1, that's been pending, gathering dust on Mitch McConnell's desk. That was the first piece of legislation that was passed by a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, which is called H.R. 1, which would have sweeping reforms to our system and just make it easier. But of course, we're seeing Republicans across the country, and this is fact, I'm not trying to be, politically biased here, challenging in court hundreds of situations that make it easier to vote. So number one is we need reform by Congress. And what can we do? Automatic voter registration when you turn 16, right? Just you turn 16, you get the card in the mail. Number two, same day registration. If you didn't get the card in the mail, you can walk it into your polling place and you get to register that day. Number three, that would clear up a lot. Number three is they need funding. We need funding. There hasn't been serious funding since post-Bush versus Gore for the states. What people call voter fraud, cynics, frankly, people who sort of abuse that term because that carries a 5-year prison sentence. It's a legal term that most people aren't going to impersonate a voter if it means going to jail.
It's also important to note that voter fraud happens, what is it,
It's infinitesimal.
0.001% of
right. And it's because who's going to risk going to jail for 5 years for that? You don't get much out of it. But a lot of what people categorize it as voter fraud is just maladministration because states don't have the funding. The HEROES Act, which has been sitting again on Mitch McConnell's desk since May, had funding for this election in a pandemic, and Republicans refused to bring it up. So number three is the states need help. We should have federal funding to fund elections, to train people, to get poll workers, to have equipment. A lot of the equipment is really old. Some of it you can't even service anymore because it's obsolete. And a lot of it is controlled by third-party vendors. So we have these money-making, contractors that have the keys, hold the keys to our infrastructure of our voting system, and it depends on the patchwork. So I would say those are the three things. We can fix this. Of course, then the question is, does it go to the Supreme Court and we have a 6-3 majority that finds reasons to strike down that kind of legislation? That's what I'm worried about with the Supreme Court.
And that was Kim Wehle. You can find her new book on Harper Paperbacks. That is the What You Need to Know About Voting and Why, which is available now. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Kim Wehle. That's spelled W-E-H-L-E. We'll be hearing more from Professor Wehle the day before Election Day, so be sure and tune back in for that. So, Lou, just curious what your reactions are to some of the fire bombs that were dropped there. Does the Supreme Court have too much power, for instance?
I mean,
she brings up that this concept of bringing democracy back to the courts, right? So if, for instance, we have a court that is 6-3, that's not very democratic.
Well, look, the Supreme Court has ebbed and flowed over the term of our democracy. And I said this before. It is not unusual for a Supreme Court justice to temper their ideology as they sit on the bench. And typically, they go from right to center. It's not often that they go from left to center, although some do. But, that has happened. The problem that you have today is, I think you have, as she said, Trump will have put 3 Supreme Court justices on the bench. This is a president who was elected by the Electoral College, but not by a majority of people voting. Yeah. And then you have someone like Mitch McConnell, who comes from basically a state that is a state that takes more out in tax dollars than it puts in. And, why does this one senator have so much control? And so, as far as I've read Scalia's opinions. I've always enjoyed reading his opinions. They were not only scholarly, but he had a flair to them. And I may not have always agreed what he said, but I agreed with how he said it and his reasoning. I'm a little bit more concerned about who's coming onto the bench now, and they don't hold a candle to either Ginsburg or Scalia. Look, the recent nominee, she was on the Ninth Circuit for less than 2.5 years.
In addition,
not Ninth Circuit, Seventh Circuit.
Seventh. In addition to the fact that I totally agree with what you said. It just seems so imbalanced, so unfair that this president, who the population did not vote for, the greater population did not vote for, has now, or is looking like, will have 3 justices, lifetime appointments, one of which was stolen by Mitch McConnell, as you pointed out, during Obama's last term, and now this one, on the cusp of another election, they should afford the same, the same. Rules, I guess you can't even really call it that. Yeah, reasoning. Thank you, because it's not even a rules.
There's no reasoning.
So maybe he gets away with 1, but 3, it just seems dramatically unfair to me.
Well, remember, Kennedy retired.
Right.
Kennedy retired.
Right.
Under questionable circumstances. So the whole thing is.
And the other thing that
this is the Constitution.
Say that again.
This is what we have.
Yes.
This is our Constitution.
Yes.
And as Matt says, you don't get the democracy you want. You don't get the government you want. You get the government that you deserve. And maybe this is what we're getting.
Well, I agree. I mean, I was just struck by some things that Kim said along those lines, like this imbalance that we're talking about, and you know, the four justices have been appointed by Democrats since 1969 and 15 by Republicans. I mean,
right.
Something's going on there.
But look, no, that is just the luck of the draw. That is when they get appointed, and when they either retire or they resign, and you know that's just the way it is. But one of her points was that so 3 will have been appointed by someone who did not get the popular vote. And I think what she may have said was like, I think Bush appointed 2, and he was basically put into office by the Supreme Court in Bush versus Gore,
which is what we're.
So look, if anything, we need to take a closer look at how the House and the Senate run, and maybe that's where the reform needs to be made. But look, I got to tell you something. The Democrats, if they take back the Senate, I doubt they'll do anything that is right to correct things, because they're going to go, we're in power and we're going to do what we want. They're not going to do anything that should be done to correct these imbalances which she has spoken to.
All right, that's Lou Esbin. We were listening to Kim Wehle a moment ago. All important stuff that centers around voting, which obviously we're in the process of doing right now. Extremely important that you get out and vote. Stay with us right here. We're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to speak to a census worker and hear about her experiences and the recent sort of, I guess, shutdown of the census. So stay right here on KHTS. This is Common Ground, 98.1 FM and AM 1220.
Finding the right lawyer can be a challenge, but in Santa Clarita, there's no need to search when there's Hacker Law Group, Santa Clarita's premier litigation firm. Jeffrey Hacker has represented celebrities, financial institutions, accident victims, real estate developers, realtors, contractors, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and other individuals and companies with their legal challenges. Mr. Hacker is one of Santa Clarita's leaders, consistently listed as one of our most influential. When everything is on the line and you need legal counseling, visit hackerlawgroup.com.
Join us this fall for online fun with the Canyon Theater Guild online youth workshops. Super fun classes with acting, singing, dancing, audition tips, script writing, scene study, improv, and putting on real shows created for online performance. Get creative, meet new friends, and most of all, have a blast from the comfort of your own home. Call 661-799-2702 or ctgworkshops@gmail.com or canyontheater.org.
When you hire a CPA firm or tax preparer, you want a firm with people who understand you, your business and industry, and participates in your local community. You need a firm that has long-standing, successful professional relationships around Southern California with attorneys, bankers, and other CPA firms who can provide additional help to your personal and business needs. Denny & Company, LLP. CPAs that make life less taxing. Call 286-8860, 286-8860.
Kip Muller. He rented an apartment in our district just 2 months before he started running for Senate.
But what Muller did before moving here bothers us even more.
Kip Muller worked for an ultra-liberal Sacramento politician who negotiated a deal to release 27,000 prison inmates.
Muller founded a PAC that helped elect a San Francisco politician who is working to open government-authorized heroin injection centers where addicts could go to legally shoot up.
And now Kip Muller supports blowing up Prop 13, raising billions in property taxes in the middle of a recession.
Kip Muller doesn't share our values.
He'll make tough times even tougher.
That's why he's wrong for us
and wrong for the Senate.
Ad paid for by Keeping Californians Working, a coalition of housing providers, energy and insurance agents. Committee major funding from Farmers Group and California Apartment Association. This advertisement was not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
And we're back. You're listening to Common Ground. I'm Jason Downs. So glad you're here. We are speaking to Terry Collier, who has been a census worker here these past few months. And can you hear us, Terry?
I sure can. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Are you out there knocking on doors right now?
I am not. No, we've wrapped things up, at least for my team. So no, I'm no longer knocking on doors.
I'm teasing. I know. So tell us. I mean, I want to get to that. I want to get to why you're no longer knocking on doors, obviously. But tell us what your experience was. Well, if you want to give us some background about who you are and where you come from, you can do that as well. Obviously, I just
Gotcha. Well,
that'll give us some context, I guess.
There you go. So my official title working with the census is field supervisor, and so that means that I had oversight of a team of enumerators, and those are AKA door knockers, and so that team, it varied as people would come in and out of teams, but it was high as 21 enumerators, and then at this point today, it boiled down to about 7 enumerators that were left. And so we handled the Santa Clarita Antelope Valley area, and a lot of us who have, are enumerators or field supervisors, we come from different backgrounds. We all, I think, just wanted to do our part and help, and this is a great way to do that, to try to help with the census, which is so important.
Well, now, and that brings me to a point, because the census, and we have Lou Esbin, our local resident legal expert attorney on the line as well, just so you know. So he can help us.
I want to just say thank you to you and all the census takers. You guys have been doing a time-honored job that our forefathers wrote into the Constitution. So I want to thank all of you for your service. I think it's critical and so important. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I second that. So that brings me to my question. Now, it's been, as Lou pointed out, an age-old, nonpartisan practice in this country, and it's been vital. So what's been different from your perspective about this particular census?
Well, there's been a number of things. So this particular part of the operation, which they call NRFU, government, we have lots of acronyms, and so that's non-response follow-up, NRFU. So we're at this point to where those who have not, residents who did not respond to their paper census that were mailed out, then they create a team to go out, and actually that's where the door knocking comes in. So initially, actually, I was starting this particular project. I was supposed to start in April, but of course, with the pandemic, it just really threw everything off kilter quite a bit, because then in order to actually there's so many different layers of things that were actually different than 2010, is that, with the pandemic, then obviously very concerned about, being compliant, protecting, the residents, protecting enumerators, so that everybody can stay healthy. So then you had to layer on, the PPE and go through different training in terms of, how do you get the information but stay socially distant and compliant. And so not only that was a layer, but also this is, this is the first year that it was a digital or electronic process, where 10 years ago, you had a piece of paper and you asked your questions and you kind of checked off the information. So now most folks were working with the device, and that added a little bit of a layer, I think, of complexity to the process. So,
and because of the pandemic, obviously they extended the census a little bit, and now they've suddenly shut it down. So to my mind, because of everything that you just described, the pandemic, the fact that they're going digital this time around, you'd want to give more time. So why less, do you think?
You know what? And that's where it just, obviously became very political. We know that the administration wanted to cut it short, cut the deadline shorter than what it was. The deadline was extended to October 31st. And knowing that time had been lost due to the pandemic, so people like myself who were supposed to start in April then didn't start until July. And so then with it being, cut short, there were, there's training involved. There's, you're mapping. There's so many things as you can imagine, lots of details that need to be put in place in order to get an accurate count. And it is all about getting an accurate count so that there's that proper representation of people for each area. But I really was hoping that they would continue to extend, or not extend, but to honor that October 31st deadline, because you could see that there's difficulty in getting counts from different communities, from different residences and things like that, and there's strategies that need to be taken care of, and there wasn't time to do those things that really should have been done. So,
setting politics aside, what was your experience overall? I mean, with your community, with your neighbors, going out and coming face to face. Was it a positive experience? Did it give you hope, or
well,
is it?
It was. It gave me. It was very mixed, Jason, in that you find that there's people who didn't understand what the census was for. It feels the things that came back quite a bit, and from my team, they would come back and people would yell, "I don't want the government in my business." That came back time and time again. So there's those communities that are undercounted are the communities that have experienced a lot of negative feedback or negative experiences. And so with that, you don't want to give the government, and that's the census, I guess, give them any more information that they need to be able to take something away, or to, they just haven't seen any of the upside of what that funding could be. They haven't seen that funding. They haven't seen schools, money, funding being poured into their schools, or being, senior centers and daycares being built in a lot of those communities. Now, granted, we didn't see that here in Santa Clarita. We're very fortunate. But a lot of those other communities that, when listening to other friends or enumerators in other districts, that's the issue.
Lou, is there?
And that's really sad.
I'm just curious if there's any legitimacy to folks feeling like, ooh, I don't want to give the government too much information.
I don't think so, because all they're doing is counting. And that counting, it goes for funding, it goes for representative democracy. Look, the problem is that, and this is a growing problem, we've had this conversation before, you have a growing percentage of the population that is just not educated in how our democracy works. And, they don't realize, hey, this is part of it. Every 10 years they come through and, they count people. Where are they? It's a problem. It's just
all comes back to education, right? I mean, there's only 5 or 6 states in this country who require civics, to be taught in school. So yeah, we do talk about that a lot. Terry.
Yeah, but that is a really important issue, though. That you're right, civics not being taught, but even specifically the census, for students to understand, elementary school through high school, to understand what that means, to understand funding, to understand budgeting, what that means, that's created and poured into different communities, what communities need and what they could use with that funding. And that's not taught. Otherwise, the kids, even if the kids could explain that to their parents or grandparents to understand what that means versus being afraid of it, or like what I don't know what the census is. I get this in the mail and I didn't know what it's for. That's really sad.
That goes to a point that we've made on this show, that we're probably now 3 or 4 generations deep of people who are procreating with no parental skills at all. So none of this is being taught at home. Everyone just wants to rely upon the school to teach these things, but, there should be a conversation that takes place around a dinner table about all these things, and that doesn't happen. And that's another growing problem that we've discussed on this show that you've pointed your finger to. You're not going to get it in the schools, and you're not getting it at home, and so it's never going to be taught.
So once again, you're setting an excellent example for your kids, Terry. How many kids do you have?
I have 2 teenage boys.
See there?
Right. Yeah. And it's been,
and they know what you're doing.
They know what I'm doing. They've heard the stories and the stories that I've shared with them from other enumerators that have, there's some great stories in terms of, enumerators that have been enlightened themselves, who have gone to these rural locations, people who are very, very poor, living in, homes, and air quotes, homes that really shouldn't be lived in, but they're happy to be counted because they want to be able to be seen. They want to be recognized, and they want money to come their way. So they were so very happy about that. So it's wonderful to hear about that. Even when we did the homeless count, there were some people out there who were very, like, what are you all doing? We're census takers. We're counting. We don't want to interfere. But they would say, "Oh, okay, well, count me," and that was wonderful.
That's great.
To see that sort of reaction.
That is encouraging.
It's interesting. There are those in affluent areas who didn't want to be counted. They go away. So there's
fascinating.
Both sides. Yeah.
Well,
I guess it's like voting. People don't realize that being counted in the census is part of your civic duty, just like voting.
Yes. So
it goes hand in hand.
It certainly does. Terry, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your experience. It was encouraging. It was.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I mean, I have to say that one of the things that I was saying was encouraging, not only just the people that we reached being more aware of what the census is about, but I think that there was a lot of things that the enumerators learned from, especially going to shelters and counting them and going to, like I said, to the homeless population, to actually be in their community and seeing what that world is like. So many of them came back and they were enlightened. Like, I see what these people need, and I'm more aware. And so I think with that, I think it was a blessing that there were so many people who were comfortable in our communities, and we're fine with our paseos, but then when you go to and you step on the other side and you see how these people are trying to survive. So for a lot of the enumerators to experience that, and hopefully they'll take that and they'll give more and maybe do more community service to help those that need it. I think that was really an advantage for a lot of the enumerators.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I hope so. That's great to hear. Stay right here with us, folks. This is Common Ground on KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We'll be right back with Lou Esbin. He's going to talk about Prop 15. Stay right there.
Santa Clarita, bedbugs are taking over our city. They've invaded our homes, our businesses, and most importantly, our sleep. If you have suspicious bites that appear nightly, or have a bug that you need ID'd, your best option is to make one call to All Pro. We offer a 100% guarantee that your bedbug issues will be solved with heat in one treatment. No need to tent or spray your house with chemicals. Heat is all all you need. Call 661-298-2200 or text me a bug picture to 661-645-0540. It's time to sleep tight again, SCV.
We all know sometimes people lose their way. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, the Way Out Recovery SCV may have the answers you've been waiting for. The Way Out is the premier intensive outpatient treatment center serving Santa Clarita. Asking for help is the first step. Call The Way Out today, 661-296-4444. That's 296-4444 for a private free assessment. The Way Out is an accredited, affordable outpatient program that accepts most insurance. Call us at 661-296-4444 or check us out online at thewayoutrecoveryscv.com. Quit battling with yourself. Ask The Way Out for help today.
Save water and save money. SCV Water wants to help you find your fit and take advantage of conservation rebate programs that will help you save. Water your landscape more efficiently. Replace your lawn with water-wise plants. Conduct free in-home water surveys. Cover your swimming pool and more. Find the programs that fit your needs and start saving today. Visit conserve.yourscvwater.com to learn more.
That's conserve.yourscvwater.com.
Senator Scott Wilk is different.
He brings people together to solve the tough problems we face.
And Senator Wilk delivers.
He backed bipartisan emergency funding to fight the spread of COVID-19.
Scott helped bring 6,500 new jobs to the high desert and is working to safely rebuild our local economy.
Senator Wilk cares. He knows people need help. That's why he is fighting to fix the state's EDD problem and clear the backlog of unemployment claims.
Why he is working to prevent evictions for COVID-affected tenants during the pandemic.
And make prescription drugs more affordable.
So people won't have to choose between paying for life-saving medications and food.
Senator Scott Wilk.
Putting party politics aside.
Scott Wilk. He delivers.
Ad paid for by California Labor and Business Alliance, CLAB, sponsored by building trades, correctional peace officers, and apartment rental organizations, and energy providers. Committee major funding from Chevron. Not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
I listen to it all day, every day.
Hometown, your hometown station.
We're back. This is Common Ground. I'm Jason Downs. I'm here with Lou Esbin. We wanted to talk about, well, there's several props on the ballot this election, but Prop 15, Lou especially wanted to focus on today. It increases funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing tax assessment of commercial and industrial property. So tell us what you think, Lou, I guess in layman's terms.
Yeah, I think the Attorney General spun that a little bit deceptively. You know, what Prop 15 does is it splits Prop 13, and it allows commercial properties to fluctuate with their values and to be reassessed and for taxes to be increased on commercial properties that are valued in excess of $3 million. The problem, among other things, that Prop 15 has is the vast majority of commercial properties have commercial leases, and the vast majority of commercial leases have what are referred to as triple net leases. And a triple net lease has what's referred to as a CAM provision, or Common Area Maintenance Charge provision, which also sweeps in the property taxes, so that the increase in property taxes on commercial property will be passed through to commercial tenants, and those commercial tenants will pass through those increases, if they can, to who? But to the consumer. So at the end of the day, it is the consumer who will be paying for Prop 15. And there, in this day and age of COVID, where so many retail tenants have been shuttered. This is the worst thing that can happen right now to this economy. Because if you have a retail location and a property that's worth more than $3 million, and I have to say that that's probably the vast majority of properties in Santa Clarita and Southern California, how are you going to pass along that increase to your customers who are not as frequent as they used to be? And look, take, for example, the mall. Don't you think the mall is worth more than $3 million, and there's already tenants that are leaving the mall? Well, Westfield is going to pass along those increases to those tenants, only causing further shuttering of retail locations. This is the California legislature, or this is the people that proposed this proposition. This is a job killer. It's a business killer. And it's highly inflationary and should not have been on the ballot and should be voted down resoundingly.
So do you think this is intentional? I mean, just educate me here for a second, because, I would think, okay, yes, it's a good thing to increase the tax on our largest companies and corporations, et cetera. But, what you're saying makes perfect sense. If they're not going to pay it, they're going to pass it on down the line until it lands in my lap. I get that. So when a bill like that is proposed, it could, is it done with good intentions? Like, yes, it makes sense to, take more money from the rich people than my neighbor who's struggling to make their payments each month. I'm absolutely for that, but...
Well, let me put it this way. So they say it's for schools and all these things. Okay, when you go to the market, everything is priced, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so when you check out, you know what that's going to cost you. Correct?
Yeah.
This proposition, nothing is priced. They're not saying where all this money is going. And don't you think that the first ones who are going to step up and demand a big piece of that pie are going to be the civil service unions, who are going to say, there's more money. We should be paid. If they said, the California retirement system is $450 billion underfunded, and we need these monies in order to make sure that the retirement system is funded, and it's not going to go anywhere but to fund the unfunded mandate, maybe I'd think a little bit more about that. But where they're not saying where the money is going, and they're not saying that the vast majority of commercial leases will pass it through to the consumer, and so the consumer is the one who's going to be paying for these things, I have a problem with that. I think that's it's intellectually dishonest.
Is there a way,
the Attorney General to have written it that way?
Is there a way to write it or amend it so that it would guarantee that the money doesn't trickle down and fall upon the consumer?
No, because those people in Sacramento don't know how to not spend money. As soon as they get a dime, they spend it. And I've shared with you my experience with the state bar, where I was on the California Board of Legal Specialization, which had its own budget and its own means of raising money. And we ran that thing so efficiently that we had a $6 million surplus that the state bar, with the blessing of the California legislature, took $6 million away from us. They couldn't wait to spend it. They eliminated the most efficient government program in the state and took all the money. No, these people don't know how to squeeze a dime tight enough that the copper comes out. They just want more. And
when can we expect?
Let them until they rein in their spending.
When can we expect your candidacy? That's what I want to know.
No time soon.
All right, that's our show for today, everyone. Thank you so much.
Oh, let me, Jason.
Yeah.
Let me just want to say, people should not hesitate to call me at 661-254-5050 or reach me on my website, esbinlaw.com, because if this proposition passes, Retail is in trouble, and I'm here to help retail in Santa Clarita Valley.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just about to shout you out. Esbinlaw.com, ESBINLAW.com. 35 years serving this area, folks. You're not going to do better. So when experience counts, count on experience. Reach out to Lou for all your questions. As always, I'd like to thank KHTS. I'd like to thank Patty, my incredible engineer. Yes. The owners, Jerry and Carl of KHTS. Thank you guys so much. And join us next week as we continue the conversation, as always, with a focus on civility and unity. A pleasure to have you here on Common Ground, where we can always agree on the important stuff. I'm Jason Downs. You're listening to KHTS. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay positive.